Coming up on the Missouri State Parks podcast, we're talking opening day at Missouri's trout parks.
And the first cast he made, when the sign blew, he hooked and landed a 3-pound trout.
You can imagine opening day with just a few hundred people.
And the first opening day took place at Bennett Springs in 1926.
Welcome to the Missouri State Parks podcast. My name is Mike Boozy Cruz. I am the superintendent at the Nathan and Olive Boone Homestead State Historic Site, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Justin Adams.
Thanks, Mike. Yep, I'm Justin Adams, and I am the regional director for the Ozark region. And today we are going to be talking about some of our favorite topics in state parks, and that's trout fishing.
You know, and I think trout fishing is a great topic to start this podcast off with because it's kind of the unofficial start of spring in Missouri State Parks, and it's really the big spring event that kicks us off. You know, and it's one of the great traditions that exists in Missouri State Parks. We're here at Bennett Springs today where they're going to celebrate their 96th year of opening day, and I think that's a pretty special tradition and probably one of our longest traditions that exists in state parks. Outside of the J. Houston Tavern at Arrow Rock State Park, which is the longest continually operating tavern west of the Mississippi River. So we're excited to be here at Bennett Springs today. We're also joined today by two special guests from the park.
Haley Schnoth, I'm a park specialist here.
Dustin Young, State Park Ranger.
So let's talk about traditions. It's one of the things we like to share a little bit on this podcast, and the tradition of opening days, we said we're going on 100 years. March 1st has always historically been the opening day of trout season, not only here at Bennett Springs, but at Montauk State Park and Roaring River State Park. But these three state parks are really each unique in their own ways, but they all share one common thing, a natural cold water spring. And these springs produce several million gallons of cool water each day that rainbow trout, brown trout, need to survive. And when we talk about trout fishing in Missouri State Parks, we can't overlook the more than 100-year history that accompanies trout fishing in Missouri. And in 1878, the Missouri Fish and Game Commission released what they called California salmon into the tributaries of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers in hopes of creating a migratory salmon run from the Gulf of Mexico to Missouri. It was later in 1879 that brook trout from Wisconsin were released into the rivers adjacent to the Frisco Railroad that ran between St. Louis and southwest Missouri. And you can imagine these stockings were literally the train pulling up on a trestle that was over a spring branch and just dumping trout out the doors. 2 years later, in 1880, Missouri received its first rainbow trout eggs from the U.S. Fish Commission's McCloud River Station in California. Missouri's first cold water hatchery was located near St. Joseph, but it suffered what was called an unsuitable water supply and closed shortly after. From the late 19th century into the early 20th century, Missouri's cold water fish species were reared at the Neosho Fish Hatchery in Neosho, Missouri, which began operations in 1888. The state's first successful cold water hatchery was located at Sequiota Springs near Springfield, Missouri, which began operations in 1921. The fish hatcheries that we know today at Bennett Springs, Roaring River, and Montauk State Park were developed in the late 1920s. These same parks would benefit greatly with the arrival of the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s that further enhanced the appearance of these parks to parkgoers. Today, our trout parks have been called the grand old ladies of the park system, known for their unique CCC architecture and more than 100-year history of memories that span many generations. So, Justin, now that we've kind of got that out of the way, let's talk about some fun facts about trout fishing in Missouri State Parks.
Okay, well, as you know, March 1st is our opening day for catch and keep trout fishing in Missouri. And the first opening day took place at Bennett Springs in 1926. And Roaring River started their first opening day in 1932, and then Montauk followed up in 1938.
And, you know, when we think of opening day today, we think of all the pomp and circumstance that kind of surrounds opening day and the thousands of visitors that our parks will see on March 1st. But believe it or not, the first opening day celebration didn't take place until 1932, and that happened at Roaring River State Park with the 6 a.m., what was called the ringing of the bells. And then that same year here at Bennett Springs, too, is when they really first kicked off that 6 a.m. trout fishing. And when we kind of dig into the history of trout fishing in Missouri State Parks, I decided to kind of look into some of the local newspapers and see what the event looked like early on. And in the 1930 Laclede County Republican, they reported that the park superintendent at Bennett Springs reported 100 to 125 fishermen on that opening day. And he was quoted as saying, "The rapid increase in fishermen each year for the last 3 years is making opening day a great event." I can't imagine opening day with just a few hundred people.
No.
You know, we'll have several thousand people coming in and packing this park here in just a few days.
Right, and so move forward quite a bit to 2016, and the Missouri Department of Conservation estimated that trout fishing has an economic impact of $187 million and supports more than 2,300 jobs.
You know, I think it's worth mentioning too that all of our trout parks really had a life before we know them today as the recreation and fishing destinations that they are. Park visitors can tour an 1896 grist mill at Montauk State Park. Roaring River was also home to a mill, and it was known as McClure's Mill. And Bennett Springs was actually home to a mill, and not only a mill, but a community. And Haley, can you tell us a little bit about the community of Bryce and the program that you have coming up?
Yes, so Bryce was here in the valley from the mid-1800s. We'll talk about some of the mills and some of the families that really built the community, like the Bennetts, of course the Bryces, and the Bolds, who brought revival to this area. And we're going to see a lot of old black and white pictures, so if that's something that you love, you should definitely come out and have a look at the slideshow.
Awesome. You know, that's one of the things, you know, that we love about state parks is they're great recreation resources. They're great places for history buffs to come visit. And they're also great places to visit if you just want to take it in nature. And I think you can do that nearly all of those things here at Bennett Springs State Park. So let's talk about some Bennett Springs State Parks because we're here today at Bennett in anticipation of opening day. And we've got some kind of fun facts that we have pulled from various sources across the state.
In 1924, it was taking 800 pounds of liver plus shortenings to feed the trout at the Bennett hatchery, and that would produce 25,000 adult rainbow trout into the Niangua.
And in 1927 and 1928, the State Blue Book reported that Bennett Springs was supposed to be a rainbow trout exclusive fishery, so I guess that was a pretty exciting thing for the time.
Right. And in 1910, the deputy game warden made $3 a day plus expenses.
And today we know the overseers of our state parks as either superintendents or assistant superintendents, but the 1930 State Blue Book reports it as the keeper, quoting them, of Bennett Springs State Park, and the keeper made $62.50 a month.
And that keeper is quoted as saying, "This rapid increase of fishermen each year for the last 3 years is making opening day a great event." And that was when they were seeing 100 to 125 people.
Not the thousands of people that we've come to expect today. So we've got our special guests here today, and they know the most and have the best information they brought with us today to talk a little bit about opening day. And Dustin, maybe you can help us out with this. What does a first-time attendee to opening day need to know? You know, there's so much going on opening day. What do they need to know when they show up at Bennett Springs?
I think the most important thing is the zones, knowledge of the zones. There's 3 zones at Bennett Springs State Park, and in those zones, there is different requirements for lures and stuff like that. So that's probably the biggest thing we see is people not knowing which zone they're in.
And fishermen are going to need a daily tag, right?
Yes.
So when they come to Bennett, where do they need to purchase their daily trout tag at?
The Bennett Spring Park store, which is the heart of the park.
And it's located right in the center, and you can't hardly miss it if you're a first-time visitor to Bennett. Come in, just look for that big park store right across from the hatchery, correct?
Yes.
And you can go to the back, and you'll need a fishing license.
Yes.
And you'll show your fishing license, and you'll get that daily tag, and you need to keep that daily tag on you while you're fishing. Is that correct?
Yes. Displayed on your back. Yes.
So a person that needs to find the rules, they're going to be able to find them at that park store, right?
Yes.
And then there's also signs around the park?
Yes. Each zone, there are signs marking that area and what specific lures you can use. You can pick up the information at the park office, or the park store. Basically has everything you need.
And I'd say know your limits too. Know how many fish you can take.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see stringers with too many fish on them. So.
Yep. And so what does your tag entitle you to? So you go to the park store, you purchase that, and that entitles you to possess how many trout?
4 rainbow trout.
Okay.
And then 1 brown trout if it's really big.
Okay.
Over 15 inches.
Yep.
And once you put that 4th one on your stringer, you're done fishing for
You're
the day?
done fishing for the day. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Dustin, take us up to the days leading up to opening day. It's really a monumental effort that takes place at all of Missouri's trout parks for the for the March 1st opener. But what does that look like here in the park from your guys' perspective?
From a ranger's perspective, we're working on our plans. We're bringing rangers in from all over the state at all the different trout parks, not just Bennett Spring. And Bennett will probably have about 10 rangers here.
Okay.
So,
You know, Justin, you and I have worked opening day at Roaring River for the past several years.
Right.
And one of the things I think that you and I, we work parking. And I think we get a good time out of seeing all the people coming into the parks. And it's amazing how many people you can pack into a park in such a short period of time.
And they arrive early.
They do. We'll start seeing cars arrive at 3:30 in the morning to get their
Right.
spots. And parking will be completely full, at least at Roaring River. I'm sure it's similar at Bennett, by the time the whistle blows. And so if you're coming, come prepared, come early, and especially if you want to get, some of the good parking spaces, be prepared for there to be a lot of people in the park.
And be prepared to be fishing shoulder to shoulder with people, especially the first hour of the day.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's one of the things that makes the Trout First opener such a tradition and so unique is it's this historical coming together of people that span generations. And it's an event. If you've never experienced it in Missouri State Parks, I'd encourage everyone at some point in their life, even if you're not a fisherman, just to come spectate and see what opening day looks like, because it's a tradition. The pictures that you see from the 30s of people standing shoulder to shoulder on the stream, they still take place today, and that tradition is still hold on. So we'd invite everybody out to one of our trout parks on March 1st for the trout opener at Roaring River State Park, Bennett Springs State Park, and Montauk State Park.
Here at the Nature Center at Bennett Springs State Park, and we have...
I'm Holly Welch, and I'm an interpreter here at the Nature Center.
I'm Patricia Chambers, and I manage the Nature Center. I'm here to welcome you into the park and help you learn a little bit more about the natural and cultural resources here at Bennett Springs State Park.
All right, well, can you tell us what kind of upcoming events are scheduled at the Nature Center?
Sure. I'd like Holly to talk about a little bit. She created a history program. Holly, can you tell them about that? It'll be playing on opening day.
Yes, we have about a 15-minute video that talks about the history of the park. It starts when the Native Americans first were in the area, and it moves through present day. It talks about the different settlers, the development, towns, just any kind of information that when you come to the park you might not think about or on your own, but it lets you walk around and see these different features and maybe look at them in a different light. And that program will be playing on a loop at the Nature Center, so you can stop by throughout the day, opening day, and you'll be able to watch that show.
But not specifically tied to opening day, we have available to anybody at any time that comes to the Nature Center, which is open during trout season from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., a Civilian Conservation Corps self-guided tour. And I had this wonderful interpreter, seasonal, Becky Day, who's local, and she created this brochure, and it talks about the 1772 Civilian Conservation Corps. They built many of the structures at Bennett Spring, and so you could pick up a self-guiding brochure and check out these very interesting buildings that was created by over 200 men that served in the First World War. There's also exhibits at the Nature Center that can give you more history on that. And another program that we have coming up that does have a limit, though, because only 10 people can participate, is how to build a fly rod. I have another great volunteer, Danny Goldsmith, who is a retired teacher, and he'll teach people how to construct their own fly rod during a 2-night class from like 6 to 8. And it's a really neat process. I went through the class myself, but my own fly rod. And it's really a traditional thing. You know, you think about it, years ago they would just use a cane pole. And now there's not too many cane poles around, and we've gotten fancy. Every Wednesday we have the Friends of Bennett Springs State Park that come here and they fly tie. And they tie flies, and sometimes they donate it so that younger people can learn how to fish with them. But it's a nice camaraderie where people come and they share their knowledge. There's a lot of things going on at the Nature Center. I encourage anybody and everyone to come out, check it out. And if you have any questions, we will be here opening day to answer them. Or if you're confused about anything, we'll be glad to help you because we want people to enjoy themselves.
So, Patty, can you tell us really quick about Kids Free Fishing Day?
So Kids Free Fishing Day is actually a Department of Conservation event, but we all get involved. We want to pass on this wonderful tradition. It's a life skill of teaching kids how to fish. So kids can come out, and we set a special area in Zone 2 that kids can use, and they don't have to worry about what kind of lure they use or if they use a worm. We just want them to get the full experience of catching a fish. And so the Department of Conservation, the hatchery manager, is really good about making sure some big lunkers and big fish are put in that area so that the kids have a better chance of catching one. And it's just an exciting time.
And give us the date of that event again.
That is always the first Saturday in May.
And that's here at Bennett Springs State Park. And if you're interested in kids fishing at either Montauk or Roaring River State Park, if you jump onto mostateparks.com, you can find the dates for those parks there as well. And man, I'm pretty excited about some of these programs. It sounds like there's some great things going on here at the Nature Center. And you know, we talked earlier that March 1st kind of signifies the unofficial start of spring in Missouri State Parks, and we've got some really exciting programs coming up across the state of Missouri at different state parks.
Oh, another event we have coming up is the Landing After Hours program, and the next topic on March 2nd is Interesting Women of Jefferson City.
And it is bison saunter season. So if you're interested in taking a hike out on Missouri's largest tall grass prairie, you can head on out to Prairie State Park on March 5th to saunter.
At Arrow Rock on March 19th and 20th, they'll be hosting a War of 1812 in the West symposium.
And of course, wildflowers are coming up, kind of the unofficial start of spring. And they've got some wildflower hikes starting at Johnson Shut-ins beginning on April 2nd.
And then again at Crowder, they have a Spring into Spring hike on March 20th. Joining us now is Jim Rogers, the concessionaire at Bennett Springs State Park. Jim, can you give us a little background about yourself?
Sure. Well, as far as the trout parks are concerned, I started trout fishing at Roaring River in the early 50s. My dad was a trooper in Oklahoma, and we vacationed all of our holidays at Roaring River, a tarpaulin and 5 army cots, and you haven't lived till you try to put one of those wooden army cots together. They break quicker than they go together. Anyway, so that's where my trout fishing began, was at Roaring River in the 50s.
So, and how long have you been here at Bennett Springs State Park?
Took the concession over here July 10th, 1980. The previous concessionaire resigned and left, and state called, and we came in here then.
So over 40 years.
Yes, at 43, I think, at Bennett, and then we were still at Roaring River. So this is, we went to Roaring River in 75, so this is our 48th year.
Wow.
Very cool.
That is really cool.
So you have a great wealth of knowledge of opening day. You have seen just as many opening days as I'm sure so many of our visitors have.
Yeah.
Tell us one of your best memories from opening day.
Well, I have 3 or 4 just popped in my head that are kind of unique. Back in the 60s, I lived in St. James. My dad was mayor. So that meant every opening day I was volunteered to park and direct traffic at Merrimack Spring. It's not a state park. But the funny part about this is we would get a lot of people trying to go to Montauk and they just kind of followed the crowd from St. Louis. And if they missed the Cuba turnoff, they turned off at St. James, and they were less than sober. And they would pull in and say, "Is this Montauk?" And we all decided to say, "Yes, it is." Park right there. And that was my first recollection of opening days. And then we've had lots of interesting things happen. We've had people fall off the top of the dam and just slide down. The people just keep on fishing. And then just a few years ago, we had a boy, 8-10 years old, fall in above the whistle bridge here, the low water bridge, pardon me, and he washed through one of the whistles. And then we had a man, I think 2 years ago, fall in right over there. And he was, this was told to me by the people that were there, he was floating down the stream, and a fellow grabbed him, pulled him over and said, "Hang on to my leg." And he said, "Okay." And that guy just kept on fishing. And he finally worked his way out and thanked him, came up here, and we got him dried off. But a couple other memorable things that stick out is back in around 76, it was always important for some reason for elected officials to attend opening day at the trout parks. And so I've been with Bond, Teasdale, Bond, Ashcroft, some I've been with a lot and some not so much. But when Governor Teasdale, around 76, became governor, he'd never fished in his life, and he's at Roaring River, and the first cast he made, when the siren blew, he hooked and landed a 3-pound trout.
Wow.
And TV was there, and he was a wonderful man, and he held it up, and he goes, "Thank you, Jimmy." You're welcome. And then, but all of the elected officials love opening day in the trout parks, and lots of great experience.
Tell us what you enjoy most about opening day.
Well, I enjoy the families. Sometimes 4 generations, great-grandpa, grandma, and so forth, down to the grandchildren. And you can look at the kids' faces and tell them if it's their first time or not. Their eyes are huge, they're excited, they don't know what to do, and they're just almost hanging on to their parents' or grandparents' legs and hands and looking around because there's thousands of people. And just watching that camaraderie and the excitement, and you can tell if it's their first time. And when they happen to catch their first fish here, it's just absolutely special. You can hear them hollering and screaming. And we had a wonderful DNR director, and she's passed away now, Carol Comer, a few years ago, caught her first fish of her life here, right up here above the bridge. I've still got her rod and reel. It's not going to be used back there. And you could hear her, I'm just going to use the word scream, all up and down this stream. She was fishing by Governor Parson, and it was fabulous. And if people would really let their emotions out, you'd hear a lot of screaming on opening day, because they have a wonderful time. And just watching these faces on these people and the kids, that's the best part.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
So what's new for Bennett Spring in 2022?
Well, we'll talk about the hatchery, Missouri Department of Conservation. There's 2 agencies in the state parks. There's the Missouri Division of State Parks underneath Department of Natural Resources, and then we have the Missouri Department of Conservation. People ask what it is, and I basically say the hatchery buildings and what's in the water is conservation. Everything else is Department of Natural Resources, state parks. Hatchery is spending about $20 million to put in some deep water wells here that will provide water in flood stages where the leaves and the mud wash down through the hatchery in flood times. And now it's supposedly they will have enough water to bypass the bad water into the river and let fresh water go through there, and that'll help the fish be able to breathe better and grow bigger and more of them and everything the fisherman wants. DNR here, we are remodeling several cabins in the park. My family are remodeling 24 plexes. We've got 12 of them almost done, and walls, ceilings, floors, and that sort of thing. The people like it. They were built in '82, and it's kind of time for that to happen. And then the state is remodeling cabins as we go along also, and well, we're fortunate to be in state parks. It could be a lot worse things out there.
Could you tell us a little bit about what a lunker is, and what do you do if you catch one, and if you know how many are stocked for opening day?
Well, the word lunker, as my mom called them, clunkers, but the word lunker just means a large fish. In the state parks, it's at least at Bennett and Roaring River, that's a trout that weighs over 3 pounds, or close to it. You know, if you got a 8-year-old kid comes up here with a 2-pound trout, he's going to get his lunker badge, patch, pictures, everything else, and so that how many they stock over opening. In the past, it's been like 50 to 150, depending, I think, on what they think the attendance will be, which is it going to be a Saturday, a Sunday, or is it going to be good weather or bad weather? And I think they stock 8,000 to 9,000 additional trout to that to make sure there's plenty here for the fishermen on opening. That's about the best. Now, some places call a lunker 2 pounds, but it's always been customary in the trout parks at 3 pounds. So.
And of course, I think the burning question everyone listening to the podcast, coming to the trout opener, wants to know is where's the best place to fish, and what should they be using?
Well, here's what we tell people, other than opening, is fish where the people are. Because the people that fish the trout parks, especially Bennett, average about 9 trips a year. So we have a lot of repeat business here. Roaring River's about 2.5 visits a year. So these people know where the fish are. And we get a lot of people in here and in my classes that say, you know, I fished there for 4 hours, never got a bite, there was no one around. And I go, well, that's wonderful. I said, could you see the bottom? Oh, it's beautiful. The gravel down there and the moss and everything. Did you see any fish there? Well, now that you mention it, no. Well, you know, find out where the people are. But on opening day, that's going to be everywhere.
Right.
The good part is rarely have we had any arguments. The people all get along, and remarkably, they don't get tangled up as much as you think. So about anywhere in the park is good any time, because they stock the trout every night at many locations. They divide it all up equally. And if you're new here to these parks, kind of look where the cars are parked and where the people are. That's my suggestion on where to fish.
And what to fish with?
Well, whatever catches the fish. No, we want to make it easy for the beginning fisherman. Stream fishing is not as easy as fishing in contained waters such as ponds, lakes, or even the ocean, because stream water moves. So when you throw your lure in here, it's not going to come right straight back to you. It's going to float downstream in front of everybody else or not, and then you're going to bring it back. So there's 4 keys to catching stream fish. Number 1 is to present it right. Number 2 is the size of the lure. Number 3 is the shape of the lure. And number 4 is what they ask for when they walk in the door, and that is what color are they hitting on. And we say white. Several reasons for that. One, the fishermen can see white in the water, and they learn how to present the lure and then they can then progress to more difficult ways of fishing. But if you're new, we want to get there before the siren blows in the morning. We want to be prepared. It's not the time that you decide to put line on your reel when you're standing in the water. And we want to throw something out there that, one, attracts a lot of attention, because you're fishing opening day, most of the fish are new fish. Two, something small enough that'll fit in their mouth. A 5-pound trout might get a quarter in there. And so that defines spinners, such as rooster tails, and then we come up with a new lure we had made for us called the Trout Buster. It's like a rooster tail. It's a single hook spinner, and it's legal in the fly area because there's a fly on it. And that's the easiest lure to catch fish for the beginner. It's not the easiest lure to use on a fly rod. It's more difficult to cast a fly line with a heavy lure. But that's what we tell the people, is to start off with a spinner. You can see it. You just throw it out, reel it in fast enough the blade turns. You're in great shape. And then if you want to fly fish, then you want to fish something that drifts down the current. Real popular with that on opening day and so forth is what they call glow balls. They're actually an egg pattern. It's like a small marble. Mm-hmm. They attract a lot of attention. We want to get a natural drift there, which means no faster than the current, no slower. Takes a little work. Down in the natural bait area, all kinds of natural bait. Cheese, corn, marshmallows, minnows, worms, they all work very well down there.
And for our first-time visitors that are coming to Bennett Spring for opening day, if they want to learn about the zones, where's the best place to come learn about the zones?
Right here. We have a little green folder we give everyone that wants one. They're out there on the counter. And it explains to them. And the easiest way to explain it is from the spring to the dam, the waterfall there. It's a fly with or without a spinner and a single hook. From the dam to the whistle bridge, it's basically anything in the world except soft plastic and natural bait. And from that bridge down to the Niagara River, it's soft plastic and natural bait only. Where you get into a little difficulty is what's the definition of a fly. But they try to explain it the best they can, but common sense prevails. We all kind of know that it's a little fuzzy thing, and you can have a spinner on it or not. And you can get very technical into making flies and the components of flies. But basically, that's it.
If somebody wanted to learn how to fly fish, where would they go to learn?
Yeah. Well, we, in the past, a few years ago, every Saturday morning at 10, we would have a free fishing class in our classroom here, and then we go outside, make a few casts, and just kind of give them general knowledge on, like I said, presentation, size, shape, color, and a few knots, and that sort of thing. But with the way things have been, we've kind of quit doing that. We plan on doing it again this year, and we do have a fly fishing school here. We haven't set up any schedules yet for the classroom portion. But if they just come in the store and ask anybody working here, we can direct you to someone in the store all the time that does a lot of fishing and that can help you learn how. It's really not difficult, and fly fishing is not difficult. In our schools, and we've had thousands of people go through them, they want to learn to cast a fly rod. And that takes a little bit of time, but it's not difficult if you've got good education. But we'll help them in the store the best we can.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us today for our opening day podcast, and for our visitors coming opening day. You know, the store is kind of the hub here of the fishing community in the park. So if they have any needs, stop by the store and check out this great place. And guys, we hope you enjoyed learning about opening day here at Bennett Springs State Park and the traditions that surround it. And as always, we'd encourage you to visit us on the web at mostateparks.com. And remember, you are always welcome in Missouri State Parks.